2025 begins a decades-long rise of the right. Here's why. Leftism is self-destructing. Its extinction is essentially inevitable. Trump voters will inherit the earth. It's their destiny. Scientific statistics and studies tell the story of the demise and self-destruction of the left. You haven't read it yet because it's not the story that leftist media wants to tell. You probably know that fertility rates are declining in the U.S. Scientists and the leftist mass media give many reasons for the decline in fertility. Some of the reasons make sense. For example, cheap and universally available birth control. Cheap, widely available, often government-subsidized abortion. However, the media avoids reporting on what may be the big truth about depopulation. For decades, leftists promulgated the population explosion and fake crisis and used it to institute government programs to decrease the fertility rate in the U.S. and all over the world. If those programs worked, then wouldn't that be one reason why the fertility rate decreased? And if government programs don't work, why do they keep creating more of them? But if those anti-baby big government and leftist NGO programs worked, then exactly whom did they work on? The answer is, of course, leftists, mostly. The people who love and believe in big government, NGOs, UN, and the leftist media. The depopulation programs worked mostly on the leftists, who have almost stopped having children entirely. From the commie Marxists in China, who were limited to one child per family for decades, to the woke Marxists in the United States, who march in lockstep to promote and obey the leftist agenda, it was leftists who created and bought into the government depopulation programs. It's also true that reproductive choices are made by women, and most leftists are women. Data backs this up. In a 2020 article titled "The Conservative Fertility Advantage" and published by the Institute for Family Studies, Lyman Stone wrote, quote, "Completed fertility for liberal women had declined markedly below that of conservative women. In recent years, the gap in childbearing between young conservative and liberal women has really opened, which may portend a bigger gap in the coming years." Wait a second. Completed fertility had declined. What is meant by that? Incompleted fertility is abortion. In the 2000s and 20s, abortion is not just accepted by leftist women. Killing their unborn babies has become a ritual in the religion of leftism. As it was with Baal worship, child sacrifice is literally celebrated, encouraged, and admired in leftism. Depopulation means that many fewer babies will be born, and so fewer people will be alive in the world in the future. But not fewer of everyone, fewer leftists, because leftists are the ones who are reproducing least. As the chart from the Nonpartisan Council for Family Studies shows, Trump voters have more babies. Who really caused the depopulation trend? Depopulation in the U.S. has to, at least to some extent, be the result of leftism. Leftist government programs and leftist NGO programs and leftist culture and entertainment, they all cause and celebrate childlessness. Take another look at the chart of falling fertility rate in the U.S. since 1800. And then ask yourself this: what else has decreased since 1800 in America? One obvious answer is the American people's belief in free enterprise, liberty, and individual rights. Those beliefs have steadily decreased and been replaced by beliefs in leftism and big government. Those early American principles were replaced by a belief in bigger and more powerful government and government intervention in our institutions and our lives. Maybe it's not a coincidence that the steepest decline of fertility rates happened in the 1930s, at the height of the New Deal and the coming of socialism to America. To summarize, when leftism increases, the fertility rate decreases. And of course, the decrease in births is mostly among leftists. But wait, there's more evidence. Although the 2024 election showed that Trump had become more popular among minorities than previous Republican presidential candidates, most minorities still tended to vote Democrat. So is it possible that the minorities might offset the relatively larger number of babies being born to rightists? In other words, white leftist women have few babies. But that is offset by minority leftist women continuing to have lots of babies. But no, surprisingly, the opposite is true. The fact is, The fertility rate of minorities is dropping faster than the fertility rate of white people. North Dakota is, of course, one of the whitest U.S. states. According to a 2018 article by Lyman Stone titled Baby Bust, Fertility is Declining the Most Among Minority Women, and published by the Institute for Family Studies, quote, North Dakota has seen an increase in births, but even as declining fertility makes the country's population whiter, it is making the country's politics redder. On average, states won by Clinton in 2016 are missing 9% of their expected births since 2008, whereas states Trump won are missing just 7.8%. That was in 2018. The trends have increased since then. The population of leftists decreased almost 1% per year between 2016 and 2018. At that rate, in a little over 100 years, there will be no leftists in America. But it won't really take nearly that long, because for one thing, statistics show that the drop in fertility rates is increasing fast. But there are a couple more things to consider too. Since 1970, fertility rates have fallen off a cliff, and the biggest decline in live births was among leftists. You don't have to look at Amish or Mormon families to see it. People on the right are having more kids, lots more. What this means is obvious. If you think of the left as a species, their population is declining. And if current trends continue, eventually they will become extinct. And then only rightists will populate America. But long before the total extinction of leftists happens, rightists would become the majority-dominant cohort, as demographers say, of the U.S. population. Just as Americans who believed in small government were the majority in 1800. So when that happens, the values of free enterprise, liberty, and individual rights will be the beliefs held by most American voters. In fact, if the 2024 election is not a one-off, that may already have happened. The 2024 election was the first one in, like forever, that exit polls showed that most of the voters identified as Republicans. From here on, rightist candidates may no longer be running uphill. J.D. Vance may own a natural majority as he enters the 2028 race. The truism, demographics is destiny, foretells the doom of leftism. Leftists say may be going the way of dodos. The problem with this theory? But this will, of course, take time. The population only changes over generations, but individual people can change their minds from day to day or minute to minute. So mightn't people change their minds before leftists become a small minority and then finally extinct? In other words, what if rightists do have more children, but those children grow up to become leftists? In practice, that seems unlikely, though. Human beings tend to become politically more right as they grow older. And there's something else. A little-known scientific discovery makes that highly unlikely that a lot of rightists will give birth to people who will grow up to be leftists, and strongly indicates that the eventual victory of rightism is almost certain, given time. That discovery is another statistical scientific discovery. We will report on it in part 2 of the story of how the right's destiny to become the majority in America again. If indeed it hasn't done so already. You probably haven't heard about that discovery because the leftists hate it and the mainstream media declined to tell it. But we will tell it. Conclusion. Leftists are at heart nihilistic misanthropes. They love the population explosion lie because it gave them an excuse to demand that government spend more money, get bigger, and intervene in our lives more. But also partly because it gave them an excuse to hate people even more. So it is fitting that leftists are in the process of destroying themselves, using their own lie.
Thank you for your interest in Rightful Freedom. Please help us grow by liking and subscribing and commenting. We would love your feedback, and see more content at our website, rightfulfreedom.com.